Terra stands as a burning symbol of devotion and obedience, a world where every breath is taken beneath the shadow of the Golden Throne. Billions arrive as pilgrims, believing that this sacred world is the clean heart of humanity's hope. But devotion is a veil, one that hides a darker anatomy of this planet. For beneath each layer of sanctified gold, beneath the echoing halls of worship, lies a descending network of forgotten corridors. These levels are spoken of only in whispers by those who maintain power systems or ventilation ducts, individuals who later vanished without trace. There are no official maps for these depths. Administratum files terminate abruptly, replaced with redacted panels. Custodians escort any access shifts, but even they stop at a certain door. Beyond it, only silence lives. Or so it appears. It is said that in those depths, light dies and sound is swallowed by walls that remember screams better than footsteps. The Imperial Palace is a monument of radiant marble and shimmering faith above, but below it transforms into something ancient and almost biological in design. Stairwells spiral like arteries into the dark, lit only by dim amber lamps that pulse with power drawn from forgotten generators humming deep beneath the crust. Those few who have spoken before their disappearance describe stone that sweats with moisture, metal doors that vibrate faintly as though sensing those who approach, and an oppressive weight in the air, like static pressure before a thunderstorm. Down here, the silence is total, engineered, purposeful. Even cogitators emit no ticking. Auspex devices return only null readings, as though these chambers exist slightly out of phase with the material world. Those who walk these lower corridors report feeling watched, not by machines or guards, but by something behind the doors, something listening, something. Officially, these regions do not exist. There are no records of their construction, no work orders, no material acquisition logs, and yet their architecture predates much of what stands above. Some believe these chambers were carved during the Unification Wars, when the Emperor walked Terra as a conqueror, cloaked in human flesh. Others suggest they existed even before him, remnants of civilizations erased by time and fire. But one phrase appears in forbidden archives, referenced only symbolically: the cells of the Silent Sun, and in later centuries, the Black Cells. These were never meant to be prisons of steel, but prisons of secrecy. The Imperium tolerates public executions, labor camps, penal battalions, but these cells are different. These are for prisoners that cannot be acknowledged, whose existence must remain unknown. And that raises the most terrifying question: who or what is being hidden? Tonight, we glimpse the forbidden. In this documentary journey, beneath Terra's shining facade, we descend past the prayers and incense, past the golden guards and hallowed cathedrals, into the dark lungs of a world whose heart may not be as holy as believed. There are voices imprisoned in silence here, and if the Imperium fears them so greatly, perhaps we should fear them more. To understand the true nature of the Black Cells, we must first peel away the curated image of Terra that the Imperium presents. Visitors arriving by Voidcraft see only splendor: towering cathedrals, radiant armor, sunlit banners of the Aquila snapping in high winds. But this beauty is a mask, carefully engineered to prevent thought, not encourage it. The masses are not meant to question what lies beneath the gleaming surface. Terra above is loud, full of parades, devotional hymns, propaganda broadcasts, but Terra below is quiet, too quiet. There exists an atmospheric divide between the world of worshippers and the world of secrets. The lower passages are padded with sound-damping material, the floors designed to mute footsteps, as though the very idea of noise is forbidden. Down there, speech dissipates unnaturally, like air flattening against invisible pressure. It is a world designed not for. In these regions, corridors stretch on without signage, direction, or visible purpose. Their geometry feels subtly unnatural, angles slightly too sharp, distances slightly elongated, as though built to disorient. The few tech adepts who claim to service these sublevels described a sensation of being swallowed by the architecture, as if the corridors sensed their presence and drew them deeper. The walls shift temperature, warm one moment, freezing the next, with no consistent thermal pattern. Some believe the material itself is layered with psychic shielding, designed to block thought as well as sight. Others said they felt an intermittent low hum in their bones, a vibration that bypassed the ears entirely, a silent resonance that made thoughts feel like echoes. It is said that if one walks too long without purpose here, the corridors begin to feel like veins, and the walker like an infection moving through them. Security in these zones surpasses all known Imperial protocol. The custodians, elite guardians of the Emperor himself, accompany any authorized personnel down to the 5th subterranean tier. Their imposing presence, golden armor glowing dimly in the low utility lights, lends a solemn weight to every step. But even they stop at a particular gate, a massive door of obsidian alloy, carved with no iconography, no aquila, no inscription. They do not cross it. They do not look at it. They stand before it with an unreadable stillness, as though they are not guards so much as warning signs. Past this threshold, entry falls under another authority, one that has no name, no uniform, no public recognition. It is an office that exists in silence, a duty that cannot be acknowledged. Those official denials feed the mystery. Administratum documentation asserts that the lower levels are merely relics of early palace infrastructure, obsolete chambers sealed due to instability or radiation risk. Yet no structural scans confirm this. No historical record lists such construction. Architects claim the engineering surpasses modern capability. If these chambers truly stem from the era of the Emperor's terrestrial reign, they are older than most of Terra's surviving architecture, older than the ecclesiarchal spires, older than many palace wings, older even than the first sanctified upgrade of the Golden Throne's supports. Some claim the Emperor personally oversaw their design. Others say he forbade any memory of their creation. And still others whisper a darker possibility, that these chambers existed before him, and he repurposed them not out of intent, but necessity. Rumor is oxygen in secrecy, and even in terror, people talk, softly, in alone, when certain no-servo skulls are near. Palace workers have shared fleeting accounts of their time in the forbidden sectors. Some reported seeing faint motion behind thick door grills, shapes shifting in shadows that should have been empty. Others spoke of voices, not loud, not screaming, but murmuring, like someone speaking into a wall from the other side. Occasionally, they heard sobbing. Once, a worker swore he heard a child laughing, a sound so impossible in that place that even remembering it made his skin crawl. Another maintenance tech insisted that behind one cell door, something repeated the same phrase over and over, in a language he could not understand, but one that made him instinctively back away. That tech was never seen again after his shift ended. The psychological effect of these levels cannot be overstated. It is not simply fear, it is compression, the sensation of being crushed from all sides by unseen awareness. Those few who have left these deeper chambers speak of the feeling that something down there does not sleep, something that watches without eyes, hears without ears, and remembers without names. Workers returning from these deaths often demonstrated erratic behavior, sleeplessness, tremors, muttering. Some refused to enter any enclosed rooms afterward. Others simply resigned from palace service with urgent, desperate priority, and left Terra if they could. The most extreme cases were quietly taken by the Inquisition for evaluation, and those individuals were never heard from again. Whatever dwells beneath does not merely inhabit physical space, it invades the mind. And so, the deeper truth begins to take shape. Terra is not merely the political capital of mankind. It is a fortress of secrets built upon foundations of fear. Its cathedrals are monuments above ground, but its real sanctums, the ones that matter, lie silent and sunless below. Every secret needs a burial. Every threat needs a cage. The question is not whether these black cells exist, but what could possibly be so dangerous that the Imperium must bury it beneath the very feet of their god. Among the many whispered beliefs about the black cells, the most disturbing concerns the identities of its occupants. Not criminals, not traitors in the conventional sense, but beings whose existence cannot be publicly acknowledged. The Imperium can hang heretics, can burn witches, can broadcast confessions of guilt. But the prisoners held here are too dangerous in a different way, not for their actions, but for their knowledge. Some are believed to be individuals who encountered things the Imperium cannot allow to be spoken. A courier who glimpsed a forbidden sigil in a High Lord's chamber. A translator who overheard an astropathic message not meant for human comprehension. A historian who reconstructed a chapter of pre-unification history that contradicts imperial myth. In these cases, the Imperium does not kill. Death would be too merciful and too public. Instead, they disappear into the cells, alive, silent, forgotten. One category of prisoners held in particular dread are the psychers who heard something. These are not simply dangerous warp-sensitive individuals. The Imperium has entire systems for dealing with uncontrolled psychers. But these specific ones have been touched not just by the warp, but by a whisper within it. They claim to hear a voice beneath the warp noise, something calm, something ancient, something that called itself Emperor, but did not sound like him. These psychers became unpredictable, not in power, but in their declarations. They proclaimed truths that contradicted ecclesiarchal doctrine. They described visions of the Emperor not as a god of light, but as a being struggling beneath the weight of existence. Some began speaking in languages older than Terran records. They were seized not with violence, but with another class of prisoners are the witnesses, ordinary citizens or functionaries who inadvertently saw something forbidden. Not a crime, not an act of treason, but a sight that undid their certainty. One worker on a lower maintenance tier allegedly saw a custodian kneeling and speaking to something behind a reinforced cell door. Another witnessed a figure being transferred between sealed containers, a figure whose outline looked nothing like human anatomy. Some glimpsed inscriptions on hidden walls beneath the palace, texts in an unknown script with shapes that induced nausea and terror just by looking at them. These witnesses were not executed. Instead, they were quietly removed. Their families were told they died in accidents. Their documentation was erased. But down in the silent halls, some of those voices still murmur into the dark, repeating the moment that destroyed their normal reality. Perhaps the most unsettling are those believed to be remnants of the Great Heresy. Not traitor warlords, those were killed, but followers, officers, psycher-adjacent technicians, or ideologues whose loyalty to Horus and the rebel forces was based not on malice, but on philosophical disagreement with the Emperor's methods. These were people who heard conversations between Primarchs, who knew the old disagreements, who understood motivations lost to history. Executing them might have created martyrs. Letting them live publicly meant risking forbidden narratives, so they were sealed away over 10,000 years ago. If these prisoners endure, they would now be impossibly aged, or sustained by some kind of stasis or metabolic arrest. Imagine the terror of ancient eyes peering through bars, seeing a galaxy that forgot their names, while they still remember everything. Yet there are whispers of prisoners who are not prisoners at all, but human vaults. Individuals implanted with memories, data, or psychic imprints so catastrophic that allowing them to die would release information or energies the Imperium cannot risk. These individuals are kept alive intentionally, as containers. Some may hold warp entities suppressed within their minds, bound by psychic locks. Others may possess truths about the Emperor's origin or his plans that contradict the official depiction of him as purely divine. Some are said to contain stored echoes of Primarch voices. These poor souls do not scream. They simply stare. Their minds are not their own. They are archives in flesh. This category of captive is frightening not for what they did, but for what they carry. But among these categories, a darker suspicion lingers, that some prisoners are not human at all. There are tales of sealed cell plates containing creatures that speak without mouths, whose shadows flicker independently of their forms, whose bodies distort Auspex readings. Some believe they are Xenos beings captured during clandestine operations, too dangerous for study, too intelligent to kill. Others suspect warp-born intelligences bound in manifested shells, awaiting study or weaponization. And there are those who claim that at least one cell holds something much closer to home, something related to humanity, but wrong, twisted. Perhaps a proto-psyker species or a malformed reflection of human evolution. Whatever their nature, the cells that house these beings are reinforced with technologies unknown to current mechanicum science and guarded by mechanisms that seem almost alive. And in every story, one element is constant. Those imprisoned here are not simply dangerous to the Imperium. They are dangerous to its story, because their existence undermines the narrative of absolute control, divine certainty, and unchallenged history. Their lives are secrets, breathing, thinking secrets, capable of unraveling everything if ever allowed to speak. Down here, truth itself is a captive. Not all who dwell within the black cells are creatures of power or knowledge. Some are simply victims of chance, people who were born in the wrong way or at the wrong moment. Among these are the psyker children, infants who manifested flickering lights from their eyes or caused objects to tremble without touching them. The Imperium publicly teaches that psykers are collected for training, service, or sacrifice. But these particular children were different. Their sensitivity was not random, but targeted. Some seemed to react specifically to the Emperor's psychic field, waking suddenly and screaming whenever they were within certain kilometers of the Golden Throne. Others spoke words in ancient dialects they never learned. A few stared upward with wide, paralyzed eyes, as though listening to a voice only they could hear, and then would beg not to hear it anymore. These children were not taken to Scholastia Psychana. They were taken below. There are also citizens whose only crime was witnessing a truth that common minds are not meant to perceive. A janitorial worker assigned to clean a restricted corridor noticed that one of the doors was slightly ajar. In that moment of curiosity or fate, he saw a figure behind it, seated on the floor, cross-legged, calm and glowing with faint light. The man claimed that the figure was smiling and that it whispered a greeting into his mind without moving its lips. He ran. He reported the incident. Hours later, the custodians arrived at his hab block. His neighbors watched him leave, escorted, silent, and he never came back. His absence was not documented. His employment record, some were taken for reasons even more haunting. Reasons based on possibility, not fact. A young woman in a sub-hive district gained attention for having prophetic dreams. She described visions of future events with stunning accuracy. The death of a local official, a power outage before it occurred, even the precise timing of a minor quake. When word reached the wrong ears, she was taken by individuals claiming to be from the administratum. In truth, they bore no insignia. Her predictions frightened someone, not because they were dangerous, but because they were uncorrupted. Prophecy without warp influence. There are whispers that these rare individuals descend from ancient Terran bloodlines, bloodlines that carried some connection to the Emperor's earliest genecraft. If these lineages still exist, then they must be controlled. Then there are the loyalists, those whose devotion to the Emperor brought them too close to forbidden faith. A monk who prayed near the palace walls for decades claimed one quiet night that he heard the Emperor speak. Not as a god, not as a cosmic presence, but as a man in terrible agony. He reported this vision with sincerity. He believed it was holy, but his testimony was blasphemy to those who maintain the official narrative. The Emperor must be a god of constant purity and strength, never suffering, never doubting, never chained by flesh. This monk was seized, not punished publicly, but sealed away. The irony is cruel. His devotion made him dangerous. His love for the Emperor was incompatible with the myth of the Emperor. Such individuals are locked away in spiritual isolation, denied prayer, denied voice, denied communion, until their faith breaks. Perhaps the most painful category of innocent captives are those who were taken as collateral, the loved ones of traitors, rebels, or scholars who vanished into forbidden archives. A wife taken because her husband disappeared after investigating ancient histories. A brother imprisoned because his sibling defected to a Xenos study cult. A child captured because her parent spoke one sentence too boldly about truths that contradict ecclesiarchal doctrine. These prisoners are held not because of their actions, but to ensure compliance from others, to silence bloodlines. Their suffering is not punishment, it is leverage. And somewhere above them, someone remains obedient because of the chains placed on those below. It is said that these innocent captives often suffer more than the dangerous ones. The ones with knowledge at least understand why they are imprisoned, but the innocents, the children, the mistaken witnesses, the unlucky, they spend years asking questions no one will answer. Some cry for rescue, others beg to confess crimes they never committed, hoping confession will free them. And some eventually grow silent, not because they find peace, but because they learn the truth. There is no release, no rehabilitation, no pardon. Their lives are not errors, they are loose threads, and the Imperium does not tolerate unraveling. Down here, innocence offers no protection. Truth and guilt become irrelevant. Only one measure matters. Does your existence threaten the illusion of control? If the answer is yes, even by accident, then you join the voiceless below, and the walls of the black cells absorb your whispers, just as they have absorbed thousands before you. The Imperium does not simply imprison, it erases. The black cells are not dungeons in the conventional sense. They are laboratories of suppression, engineered to remove not only freedom, but thought, memory, and identity. Behind every reinforced door, a system of psychic, biological, and mechanical controls awaits, calibrated to crush the mind gradually, efficiently, irrevocably. Custodians monitor the process, but the true machinery is hidden. A web of psychic dampeners, neuroinhibitors, and warp-resistant alloys designed to prevent anything within from reaching beyond its walls. Some cells pulse faintly with psychic energy, undetectable to standard auspex, but lethal to untrained minds. Others are so isolated that time itself seems to stretch and twist, bending perception until years pass in what feels like hours, or hours in what feels like decades. It is a calculated horror. No screams escape, no records remain, and memory suppression is the first layer. Each prisoner is subjected to devices that emit psychic resonance frequencies designed to overwrite recollections. Some are said to feel the experience like sand poured into a clock, pieces of identity disappearing grain by grain. One testimony, relayed by a former maintenance tech before disappearing, described seeing a prisoner convulse violently as memories of names, faces, and entire childhoods evaporated. Afterward, the subject would stare blankly at the walls, murmuring fragments of conversations that never occurred. Over time, the individual becomes a vessel, a husk containing only the bare minimum of cognition required to survive confinement. This process is slow, ensuring that no psychic backlash or warp disturbance can trigger awareness beyond the cell. Yet even as memories are stripped, a subtle awareness remains. For those touched by the warp, isolation is absolute. Psychic prisoners are placed in chambers constructed with layers of anti-warp crystal and psychic null fields. The moment their powers flare, the fields respond, compressing and suppressing the energy until the prisoner collapses into a state resembling death. Chronic suppression of this kind creates an unnatural symbiosis between body and cell. The prisoner becomes part of the machinery, a living component in a system that functions solely to prevent information from escaping. Occasionally, whispers of unexplainable phenomena emerge, shadows moving against the light, voices echoing across empty corridors, or fleeting glimpses of prisoners who should be unconscious but appear in multiple locations at once. The Imperium acknowledges none of it, yet those who have served near these wards speak of a persistent chill, a warning that the cells themselves are alive in some unknown way. Physical confinement complements psychic suppression. Cells are built with modular walls of alloys unknown to even the highest-ranking mechanicum engineers. Alloys that absorb vibrations, heat, and sound. Doors are seamless and unmarked, impervious to all conventional tools. Inside, the environment is controlled to extremes. Temperature swings, artificial atmospheres, and controlled gravity shifts are applied not to comfort, but to disorient. Prisoners may experience weeks of darkness, followed by sudden exposure to blinding light. Floors may tilt imperceptibly, causing subtle nausea over days. Air may be purified or polluted at random intervals. These conditions do not merely break morale, they physically and mentally reshape the mind, ensuring submission without the need for open violence. Some prisoners lose the ability to judge the passage of time entirely, further isolating them from reality. Sound is weaponized within the black cells, while the halls outside may echo with footsteps or the mechanical hum of servitors. Inside the cells, silence dominates, or it is distorted. Low-frequency vibrations, inaudible to most human ears, are sometimes used to manipulate emotions. Anxiety, despair, anger, or terror emerge spontaneously, with no clear cause. Whispered recordings of unknown voices are played on subsonic loops, generating hallucinations and paranoia. Some prisoners report hearing relatives calling their names, or the Emperor's voice, offering impossible promises or cruel mockery. The goal is disorientation and psychological breakdown. Even the act of speaking becomes dangerous. Vocal cords are weakened through controlled airflow, ensuring that sounds cannot form coherent speech. Communication with others. Some prisoners are subjected to methods so advanced they defy understanding. Rumors describe soul-binding procedures, psychic impressions extracted, stored, and sometimes reintroduced to prevent full autonomy. Others speak of stasis chambers that intermittently awaken prisoners, forcing them to experience moments of terror, only to fall back into suspended animation. Time itself becomes a weapon, days compressed into moments, years extended into centuries of perception. Custodians or unseen wardens perform procedures with near-religious ritual, ensuring absolute obedience. The more dangerous the knowledge, the more extreme the measures. And yet, the Imperium views this as necessary. Every prisoner is potentially the carrier of truths, memories, or power that could unravel the foundation of human civilization. Silence, control, and unending observation are the only tools deemed sufficient. Ultimately, the horror of the black cells is not in the walls or the locks, but in the precision of their cruelty. They do not merely confine, they reshape, erase, and control entirely. Every prisoner emerges, if they emerge at all, altered beyond recognition, stripped of history, memory, and will. The Imperium does not release them for fear of what they know. Those who remain alive are silent warnings, living embodiments of secrecy enforced through unimaginable methods. Here, pain is procedural, fear is structural, and hope is not allowed. The Emperor's justice, invisible and absolute, manifests not in battle or decree, but in the very machinery that binds the mind and body of every soul held within these forbidden chambers. For centuries, scholars, inquisitors, and whispered historians have debated the Emperor's motives. Why maintain the black cells at such cost? Why risk the psychic backlash of tampering with minds and souls on such a scale? Official doctrine claims it is to protect humanity, to safeguard the Imperium from threats too dangerous or incomprehensible to be tolerated. But the longer one peers into the depths of these chambers, the less certain that explanation seems. The cells are meticulous, surgical, designed not merely to confine, but to erase identity. They are not prisons of justice, but instruments of absolute control. And when control reaches this level, the line between protection and tyranny begins to blur. In silence, one can ask, is the Emperor's hand truly merciful, or is it the cold weight of necessity? Some theorists argue the Emperor is acting to shield the Imperium from knowledge too destabilizing for the general populace. Perhaps certain prisoners witnessed truths about the nature of the warp, the origin of the Primarchs, or the hidden machinery of his own divinity. These truths, if revealed, could incite rebellion, warp exposure, or widespread heresy. Yet others posit a darker interpretation. The Emperor's will may be absolute, not to protect humanity, but to maintain a meticulously curated reality in which he is infallible. In this reading, innocence and guilt are irrelevant. Every prisoner is a variable in a controlled equation. Their thoughts, memories, and perceptions adjusted or removed as necessary to maintain the illusion of perfect order. The cells, then, become a theater of morality, dictated entirely by survival of the narrative, rather than survival of the species. Psychically, the Emperor is often described as distant, omniscient, and beyond human comprehension. Yet those few who have glimpsed the depths of the black cells suggest a more intimate and troubling truth. Some prisoners report sensing a presence during isolation, a subtle psychic touch, like a hand tracing patterns on a mind, shaping thought without physical contact. Others describe fleeting visions of the Emperor not as a luminous figure on the golden throne, but as a being burdened with agony, struggling to contain forces that would otherwise devour reality itself. These impressions suggest that the black cells are not merely punitive or preventive measures. They are extensions of his will, mechanisms of balance, horrifying and necessary, but still motivated by a burden too immense for mortal comprehension. This duality, care and cruelty in the moral ambiguity, becomes even more pronounced when considering the innocents imprisoned. If the Emperor is motivated purely by necessity, then the suffering of children, witnesses, and loyalists may be seen as collateral, justified by the larger goal of protecting the Imperium. Yet the act of holding them in endless silence, twisting perception and erasing memory, seems to surpass simple necessity. It suggests a deliberate orchestration of fear, a control that extends beyond the physical into the very psyche of those subjected to it. To witness their torment, even indirectly, some speculative accounts suggest that the Emperor's true intent may also involve preparation for a threat unknown to all but him. Perhaps the prisoners themselves are instruments, containers for knowledge, psychic power, or entities that must be maintained in stasis until some future moment. The measures taken within the black cells are extreme enough to suggest the stakes are incomprehensible. Some theorists claim these cells are designed not to punish, but to stabilize elements of reality that would otherwise collapse under the strain of war, corruption, or the influence of the warp. If this is the case, then the horror of the cells is not arbitrary cruelty, but a mechanism of cosmicness. Even within the Imperium, the black cells are regarded with fear and reverence. High lords, custodians, and inquisitors rarely speak of them openly. They exist in a paradox, invisible to law, yet omnipotent in effect. This secrecy reinforces the dual nature of the Emperor's intent. On one hand, the cells act as a protective measure, a failsafe against dangers too subtle or insidious for conventional enforcement. On the other, ultimately, the Emperor's true intent may never be fully known to mortal minds. The black cells are a crucible where morality, necessity, and horror converge, a place where the line between protection and tyranny dissolves. To walk the corridors below Terra is to confront the terrifying reality that divinity may demand cruelty, that salvation may require suffering, and that the very foundations of the Imperium rest upon the silent, broken souls of those who will never see the light again. Whether these measures are an act of mercy or domination, of foresight or obsession, remains a question without answer. A question that resonates in every shadowed corridor, in every silent cell, and in every mind that dares to imagine what lies beneath the Golden Throne. Among the countless prisoners whose lives are erased in silence, there are whispers of one who may have defied the system, a prisoner who, against impossible odds, escaped the black cells. The tale is fragmentary, drawn from rumor, shadowed logs, and forbidden anecdotes whispered among palace maintenance crews. No official record exists. Custodians deny it. Yet those who claim to have seen the aftermath describe a corridor suddenly emptied, a door left ajar for a moment before it sealed again, and faint psychic echoes lingering in the air. Some insist the escape was not merely physical, that the individual somehow bypassed the psychic null barriers, the stasis fields, the wards of isolation, and the temporal distortions meant to disorient and contain. It is a story that terrifies the Imperium and inspires morbid fascination among those who dare ponder it. The escapee is said to have been neither a psyker nor a traitor in the conventional sense. Rather, some sources claim they were a witness, an innocent, taken because of knowledge that could unravel sacred narratives or reveal forbidden truths. Reports suggest that during transfer or temporary relocation, a combination of chance, cunning, and psychic resonance allowed the prisoner to slip through the layers of containment. Allegedly, a custodian gate malfunction or an unnoticed flaw in the psychic dampeners provided a fleeting opportunity. In that moment, the prisoner moved through corridors designed to erase mind and body alike, leaving only subtle anomalies, faint heat traces, residual psychic signatures, and minor structural distortions as evidence. For the few who noticed, it was a momentary rupture in the perfection of control, a reminder that even the Emperor's will may not be absolute. The rumors diverge after the escape. Some claim the individual vanished into the hidden underhives of Terra, blending with the masses, unrecognized and unrecorded. Others suggest that they were taken up by rogue elements, exiled inquisitors, clandestine Xenos agents, or heretical cults, who saw the escape as an opportunity to gain forbidden knowledge. A few even whisper that the escapee may have crossed the void, reaching a vessel capable of leaving Terra entirely, carrying secrets that could alter understanding of the Emperor's power, the Primarchs, or the warp itself. Each version of the story carries with it the same chilling implication, that what resides within the black cells is not entirely contained, and that a single mind can disrupt centuries of secrecy, unraveling a carefully maintained equilibrium of fear, control, and obedience. What terrifies the Imperium most is not the escape itself, but the potential consequences. If a single prisoner could slip through the absolute containment measures, what does that suggest about the rest? Could others have already escaped undetected, wandering the underhives or even influencing events in ways no one would suspect? Could knowledge of the Emperor's true methods, of the innocents imprisoned, or of psychic manipulations be spreading subtly through whispers? Dreams, or corrupted messages. The mere possibility erodes confidence, fosters paranoia, and forces even the highest-ranking officers to question their own security. The rumor of escape is not celebrated or feared in simple terms. It is a quiet, pervasive terror, a haunting reminder that the perfection of the Imperium is fragile, even beneath the Golden Throne. Some accounts suggest the escapee was altered by the black cells in ways unforeseen. The psychic dampeners, memory suppression, and stasis chambers may have inadvertently amplified latent abilities or unlocked subconscious capacities. Those who claim to have sensed residual traces speak of faint, impossible presences, minds moving just outside perception, thoughts brushing against the collective unconscious of those near the escape path. Some theorize that the individual became something other than human, a hybrid of awareness, memory, and psychic potential. Whether this transformation was deliberate, accidental, or emergent remains unknown. Yet the implication is clear. The black cells do not only contain, they can also transform. And sometimes, those transformations escape the intended confines. Even in whispered speculation, the escape serves a narrative purpose. It represents hope and terror simultaneously. Hope that the powerless might defy impossible odds. Terror that the Emperor's system of silence is not infallible. Among those who dwell in knowledge of the cells, scholars, rogue archivists, and inquisitorial agents, the tale is a warning. No matter how deep the corridors, how sophisticated the psychic nulling, how meticulous the surveillance, the possibility of rupture exists. Control is never absolute. Fear, no matter how well engineered, may be outmaneuvered. And if one mind can escape, what other truths might slip through, silently influencing the galaxy without ever being traced? Ultimately, the rumored escape underscores the paradox of the black cells. They are at once the height of absolute control and the embodiment of its limits. Every wall, every ward, every psychic lock is designed to enforce silence, obedience, and secrecy. Yet in that very perfection lies fragility, and the tiniest miscalculation, the slightest anomaly, or the most desperate mind can shatter it. The Imperium fears the unknown, yet it cannot contain it entirely. A reminder that even beneath the Golden Throne, where death, erasure, and despair are absolute, hope and horror remain intertwined, whispering through the dark corridors of Terra for those willing to listen. After traversing the shadows of Terra, witnessing the prisoners, and understanding the mechanisms of the black cells, the final revelation becomes unavoidable. The Emperor's actions are not merely punitive, nor even simply protective. They are existential. The black cells are more than prisons. They are fulcrums, balancing forces that humans cannot comprehend. Each life erased, each memory suppressed, each mind warped is a calculated measure, a cosmic variable adjusted to maintain stability. Some prisoners are dangerous because of knowledge, some because of power, and some because of innocence. And yet, they all serve the same purpose: to prevent the collapse of a reality structured around the Imperium's myth. In this sense, horror is not incidental, it is intentional, inseparable from necessity. Witnessing the innocents, children, loyalists, and accidental witnesses, one realizes that morality is irrelevant in the eyes of absolute authority. The cells do not discern between sin and virtue. They only calculate consequence. Those who might awaken questions, reveal truths, or destabilize the narrative are contained, erased, or broken. Even those who appear harmless may carry the seeds of chaos within their minds, echoes of events, whispers of knowledge. Psychic resonance, anything that could fracture the carefully curated Imperium. The black cells are not merely about punishment. They are instruments of cosmic foresight, horror engineered to anticipate possibilities before they manifest, to remove risk before it can bloom. And in that foresight, terror is born. There is also the persistent question of the Emperor himself. His gaze is said to sweep across Terra and the stars, encompassing infinity. Yet these cells suggest a paradox, a being capable of divine omniscience, yet willing to allow unfathomable suffering. Is the horror of the black cells a reflection of necessity or of his own burdened consciousness? Some prisoners describe fleeting impressions of him, not as a god of flawless light, but as a titan straining under impossible weight, making decisions no mortal could bear. Their fear is absolute, yet so too is their awe. This duality permeates the cells. The horror they experience is inseparable from reverence, the suffering from purpose. One cannot exist without the other. Among the rumors and whispered legends, there are hints that the cells themselves may have purpose beyond containment. Some speculate that the prisoners, the living archives, the psychically altered, the transformed, are part of a broader mechanism. Perhaps their pain channels energy, stabilizes the warp, or feeds some psychic balance only the Emperor comprehends. Others suggest that the memories extracted, the knowledge erased, are stored in ways imperceptible to observers, forming a hidden network of intelligence that guides the Imperium subtly. If true, the horror becomes not only personal, but systemic. Every cry, every broken mind, every stolen memory contributes to a grand design invisible to all but the architect, whose hand is both creator and executioner. The final horror may be the realization that the black cells are eternal, not in the physical sense alone, but in consequence. Each life lost or altered echoes indefinitely through the warp, through those who witnessed indirectly, through the cultural and psychic ripples that shape human history. The Imperium relies on silence, but silence itself is fragile. Every whisper, every rumor, every imagined possibility carries potential rupture, even in death or erasure. The prisoner's impact persists, subtle yet insistent. This suggests a universe in which suffering is both tool and warning, in which fear is not punishment alone, but a structural component of survival, and in which knowledge itself can become a weapon too dangerous to allow freely. And so, as we conclude this descent into the underworld of Terra, the observer is left with an uncomfortable truth. The Emperor's black cells are a mirror of the Imperium itself, magnificent, awe-inspiring, and terrifying above ground, hidden, cruel, and incomprehensible below. Every decision, every procedure, every erasure reflects the absolute tension between survival and morality, protection and tyranny, divinity and human suffering. In studying these cells, one glimpses the hidden calculus that governs not just punishment, but existence itself, a calculus whose implications extend far beyond the walls, corridors, and shadows, affecting the galaxy in ways that may never be understood. The Emperor's purpose, the prisoner's fate, and the mechanics of silence remain shrouded in mystery. Yet from this darkness emerges one undeniable realization. Terra is a world of light built upon foundations of shadow, and the black cells are the ultimate manifestation of that truth. In their corridors, innocence, knowledge, and power are measured not by morality, but by consequence. To walk their halls, even in imagination, is to confront the uncomfortable knowledge that in the Imperium, survival often demands horror, and that some truths are too dangerous to ever speak aloud. And so, we leave the shadows, carrying with us only the echo of silenced voices, a reminder that for every light, there is darkness, and for every empire, secrets too terrible to reveal. The journey into the depths of Terra and its hidden black cells leaves an indelible mark. Above ground, the golden throne gleams, the banners flutter, and billions continue their prayers, oblivious to the reality beneath their feet. But below, in corridors the Imperium refuses to acknowledge, life and memory are manipulated, erased, and contained. The black cells exist not merely to punish or hide secrets, but to maintain the fragile equilibrium upon which humanity's survival depends. Every prisoner, every whisper, every flicker of consciousness in those shadows serves a function beyond comprehension. They are living instruments in a cosmic design, and their suffering is a tool wielded with precision. To imagine what occurs in those sunless halls is to confront an uncomfortable truth. The survival of the Imperium is inseparable from horror. Yet there is a paradox here that cannot be ignored. The Emperor is revered as a god, the protector of mankind, the unifying force that holds the galaxy together. And yet, the black cells reveal a side of him that is inscrutable, burdensome, and terrifying. Decisions that shatter minds, erase innocence, and twist reality are presented as acts of necessity, acts meant to safeguard a fragile order. But how does one reconcile omnipotence with cruelty, divinity with the deliberate manipulation of human suffering? It is a question that haunts every observer of Terra's hidden depths. The horror of the cells is not merely in the lives they contain, but in the reflection they cast. That absolute tower, even when wielded with purpose, exacts a cost no morality can measure. Even more chilling is the silence that permeates these corridors. The black cells are designed to prevent knowledge, to erase existence from history, to deny the universe itself the memory of those imprisoned. Yet whispers persist, rumors of escape, fleeting psychic traces, inexplicable shadows moving against light. These anomalies suggest that control, no matter how absolute, is never perfect. There is always a chance, however small, that the truths hidden within the cells could resurface. And perhaps that is the most terrifying notion of all, that the Imperium's perfection is an illusion, maintained not by omnipotence, but by fear, manipulation, and a relentless commitment to secrecy. As we depart from this descent into Terra's underworld, one cannot help but reflect on the broader implications. Humanity survives under a God whose hand is both protective and merciless. Civilization persists atop foundations of pain, silence, and unacknowledged terror. The black cells are the embodiment of that balance, a stark reminder that in the Imperium, light and shadow are inseparable, and that every act of salvation carries with it an unspoken cost. To remember the prisoners, to imagine their suffering, is to glimpse a truth that most will never see. And perhaps in that knowledge lies the most enduring horror, that the Emperor's perfection, the Imperium's glory, and the safety of mankind all rest upon a hidden world of suffering, too terrible to name.